all minorities, our respectable clergy are brought together in consultative process. The topic of today's conference is Privilege of Minorities in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So now I invite our first guest speaker, Right Reverend Bishop Azad Marshall, the moderator, Bishop of Church of Pakistan and Chairman National Churches Council Pakistan. Please come forward to grace the dais and show his inspiring thoughts.
Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Justice Umar Bandial Sahab, Tasadduq Hussain Jilani, former Chief Justice Sahab, Mr. Justice Shoaib Sadal Sahab, bishops of the Church of Pakistan who have been introduced, respected clergy of other churches, diplomats, ambassadors, representatives of religious minorities, Mr. Samuel Pyara, Chairman Implementation Minority Rights Forum, Pakistan. Indeed, he has an amazing energy to organize all of us and this occasion. I have my written notes, but I will shorten this, but I would like to say something in Urdu before I do that. It's a very unique occasion. ये एक बड़ा ख़ास मौका है कि मैं दो चीफ जस्टिस की और मिस्टर जस्टिस सडल साहब की प्रेजेंस में हूँ. It is really, I remember in my college days, I knew Chief Justice Naseem Hassan Shah Sahab very well. And he was very kind to us, like a family friend. And we used to be able to go to, हम जब चाहते उनके पास चले जाते थे. तो मैं एक ज़मीर का कैदी था हमारा, जिसके लिए हम गोया जंग लड़ रहे थे. तो एक दिन जब उनकी मौत हो गई कैद खाने में, तो मैं ये सोच के कि मैं चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ पाकिस्तान को जानता हूँ, मैं उनके पास चला गया. गाड़ियाँ खड़ी थी, वो कोयटा जाने के लिए जा रहे थे, और मैंने किसी वो जो स्टाफ है उनको कहा जी मैं उनको मिलने आया हूँ. उन्होंने कहा जी आप कौन है? मैंने कहा जी मैं उनको जानता हूँ, आप मेरा नाम बता दीजिए, अगर आप बता देंगे तो वो ज़रूर मुझे मिलने का मौका देंगे. लो एंड बिहोल्ड उन्होंने कहा उसको अंदर बुलाओ. मैं अंदर गया डरता. I was crying because of my friend who lost his life. तो उन्होंने मुझे पहले सुनते रहे बड़े प्यार से, फिर एकदम कुछ हुआ, वो अटेंशन बड़े बैठ गए, कहने लगे Do you know that you are talking to the Chief Justice of Pakistan? मैंने कहा मैं भी घबरा गया. मैंने कहा जी ऐसा ही है, तो you better say whatever you are saying, it better be true. मैंने कहा जी वो भी मैं इसीलिए तो आया हूँ आपके पास. And then he asked one of his stenos to come, and he said, this is your statement about that gentleman. And he very kindly then orders to investigate further. So I remember how kind and loving Chief Justices are, of course with a lot of authority that they carry. Ladies and gentlemen, I will go back to my English notes. It is an honor for me to pay homage to the late former Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Alvin Robert Cornelius, and acknowledge his contributions to the judicial history of Pakistan as a prominent jurist and legal philosopher. Justice Cornelius' work speaks for itself. His courage, his integrity and fairness continues to inspire generations of lawyers and judges in Pakistan and beyond. He was a staunch defender of the rule of law and advocate for judicial independence. Although he was a Christian by faith, Justice Cornelius had a deep understanding of both Hinduism and Islam in South Asia, which was reflected in his work. Foremost amongst his legal philosophy was a synthesis of Islamic ideas and Western thought. In numerous judgments, Justice Cornelius used Islamic principles, especially the concept of adl or insaf, and employed it in the local context. Jurists consider it the most significant intervention in the development of Pakistani judiciary. During his tenure as the Chief Justice, Justice Cornelius also tried to broaden, solidify, and enforce human fundamental rights in Pakistan. Even though Pakistan did not have parliamentary democracy throughout his tenure as the Chief Justice, yet he tried to ensure that the courts played their part in the protection and enforcement of fundamental rights in the country. Striving for justice is striving for the delight of God's heart. Justice is about visibility. Justice is close to God's heart. Justice is God's idea. This does not originate with us. The Old Testament prophet Micah's challenging words describe that justice is not just an ideology, but that which he requires alongside the pillars of mercy, love, and humility for society to taste shalom, peace, and peaceful order for the functioning of the world. A just society must also ensure that individuals are not discriminated against on the basis of their religion or belief, and that they are able to access same opportunities and protections as all other members of society. This includes access to education, employment, health care, and other basic services, as well as the right to participate fully in the political and social life of the community. When justice is not upheld and individuals are persecuted and discriminated against because of their religion or belief, it can lead to conflict, instability, and breakdown of social trust. I'm shortening it by going back to the word of the scriptures. We are here, I would like to say, this afternoon, we are here by God's plan and design in response to the cry of God's people around the world. God's heart has always been moved by the plight of the vulnerable. Moses was raised up when the Israelites cried out to God and groaned under the heavy burden of slavery. Exodus, book in the Torah, it is written that the crying and groaning comes to God's heart, and God's heart is moved. When the crying goes to God's heart, then God moves. In Psalm 102, David cried out to God, pleading that God will look down from his sanctuary and bring close to the human experience that compels even David to recognize that we are all vulnerable to injustice and mercilessness. As we have heard from our dear Father James Shannon, that Jesus Christ too laid out his priorities, proclaimed justice as a key among them to bring healing and salvation to the suffering humanity. One of the cherished goals that we all have is to create a pluralistic Pakistani society where fundamental rights are respected, but it would continue to elude us unless we realize that we are living in a world of globalized interdependence, a world of interconnectivity, of cyberspace, of shrunken distances, of cross-border migration, and a world of rapidly changing cultural identities. We are all members of one race of humans with common challenges, and we cannot confront these challenges without forging a common alliance. Article 20 of Pakistan's Constitution does not merely allow a person a private right to profess their faith, but confers a right to practice their faith both privately and publicly. Moreover, it confers the additional right not only to profess and practice their own religion, but to have the right to propagate their religion to others. It is important to note that this propagation of religion has not been limited only to Muslims who have having the right to propagate their religion, but this right is equally conferred on non-Muslims to propagate their religion to their own community and to their own people. This should not be seen as a right to encourage conversion, but more importantly, should be seen as a right against forced conversion or imposing belief on others. Islam does not compel people of other faiths to convert. It has given them complete freedom to retain their own faith and not to be forced to become Muslims. This freedom is documented both in the Holy Quran and Sunnah. Though Islam has categorically emphasized the protection of religious minorities, I am compelled to say that we still have a long way to go in ensuring the implementation of these Islamic injunctions in letter and spirit. Crucial challenges include the religious conversion and forced marriages of underage minority girls. The misuse of blasphemy laws continues to haunt our communities. It is imperative that child marriage restraint laws are fully implemented and legislation is carried out to protect minor girls from being forced to change their religion. We need to understand that such conversions and marriages are a cover for sexual exploitation of children, and the disconnect in the state law and Sharia law is helping the perpetrators to elude justice. Abuse of the blasphemy law is also a serious cause of concern, not just for non-Muslims, but for Muslims too. We have repeatedly called for implementation or effective procedural and institutional safeguards at the investigative and judicial level to prevent the misuse of these laws, but this issue also remains unaddressed. Before concluding, I would like to draw your attention to another important issue that has a direct bearing on my community, sir. We are already perturbed by the results of 2017 census, which we believe grossly understates the Christian population. Now that the government is conducting Pakistan's first digital census, we are again hearing complaints of undercounting, faulty questionnaires, and delay tactics by numerators. I hope that the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan, under your leadership, will take notice of these concerns and direct the government to ensure a thorough and transparent census process. And in conclusion, may we cherish the legacy left by Justice Alvin Robert Cornelius as an example and a staunch defender of the rule of law for promotion of adl o insaf in Pakistan. Pakistan Zindabad.
Now I would like to invite Madam Swahat Rizvi, Secretary Lahore High Court Bar Association, to come here and share her views with us. Thank you.
Good morning, rather good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. I am Secretary Lahore High Court Bar, and in 150 years history of High Court, I am the first woman secretary in Lahore High Court Bar Association. Chunki mera introduction was not complete, so I prefer to introduce myself. And I am an advocate Supreme Court of Pakistan, or there are very few women here who are advocate Supreme Court of Pakistan. I would like to thank the management of this function who have invited me and at last given me an opportunity to speak in presence of CJP, Honorable CJP and Tasadduq Jilani Sahab, our former Justice, Chief Justice. So, sir, I am grateful that you have honored us, and I want you to hear few of our concern. यहाँ अभी तक जो बातें हुई हैं, मैं थोड़ा शायद दोनों bilingual बोलूँगी, so that both of the communities can hear me. यहाँ अभी तक जो बातें हुई हैं, we have portrayed a very good picture of our country, that we are doing much for the minorities and they are very comfortable and they are enjoying everything. But I think that this is what I am hearing from minorities themselves, which is very astonishing for me, that instead of raising their voices, what is being done in this country with the minorities, we are out of fear. I am sure we are saying that we are enjoying a very peaceful life in Pakistan. Recently, we have seen that 7 teachers have been murdered just because they belong to a religious minorities in Parachanar, and no action has been taken by the government. Although intolerance and violence in the name of religion and faith is in the history of human history में ये पहले से बहुत लंबी इसकी history है, that religion has been used as a tool. लेकिन having said that, I think we need to focus on few things. Justice Tasadduq Jilani साहब की एक judgment आई 2014 में, in which 7 directives were issued to the government, जिसके अंदर National Commission for Minority Rights बनाना था या National Council for Minority Rights बनाना था. But having said that, I must take you back to the history, जहाँ पे 1990 में Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto was the first one who ordered for establishment of a National Commission for Minority Rights. और gradually उसके functions कुछ देर तक it remained redundant, और उसके functions जो हैं वो properly उसको बनाया नहीं गया, format नहीं किए गए, rules नहीं बनाए गए, लेकिन ultimately जो ministry थी, Ministry of Religious Affairs का जो minister था, he was heading that commission, and still it is known as the commission, National Commission for Interfaith Harmony. और वो भी एग्जिस्ट करता है. मीनवाइल जलानी साहब की 2014 की जजमेंट आ गई. मैं भी यहाँ पे इस फंक्शन में आने से पहले एक वो सर्वे पढ़ी थी, जिसके अंदर बड़ी एस्टॉनिशिंग बात जो मेरे सामने आई वो ये है कि 2023 में हम खड़े हैं और आज दिन तक सर आपकी इस जजमेंट के ऊपर सिर्फ 22% इम्प्लीमेंटेशन हो सकी है, which shows that how fair the state and the government is for minority rights. 22% implementation has been done. By the way, this is not something to clap for. It's been for 2014 till 2023, and still there is not 100% implementation of the judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, which is binding upon all the state organs. So this is a sorry state of affairs, I must say, कि जो minority rights हैं, उनको हमारी जो state है, उसकी will नहीं है कि to protect them and to protect the rights of the minorities. सिर्फ इसमें फिर religious minorities सारे आ जाते हैं. Not only Christians, we have to include Hindus, Ismailis, Kailash के लोग और Parsis, everyone. So उसके बाद सर इसके ऊपर एक और जो मैं थोड़े से फैक्ट्स आपसे I would like to share with you कि आपने 7 डायरेक्टिव इशू किए थे, जिसमें उसके बाद 28 फॉलोअप हेयरिंग हुई हैं सो फार, और 79 सप्लीमेंट्री ऑर्डर्स पास किए ऑनरेबल सुप्रीम कोर्ट के बेंचेस ने फॉर कंप्लायंस ऑफ दो 7 डायरेक्टिव्स, और जिसमें अभी तक ना तो कोई टास्क फोर्स बनी है, ना नेशनल काउंसिल बनी है, और ना कोई रिजर्व कोटे की जहाँ तक बात है वो कुछ हद तक इन्होंने इम्प्लीमेंट किया इन सर्विस माइनॉरिटीज़ के लिए, लेकिन जहाँ पे माइनॉरिटीज़ मौजूद नहीं हैं वहाँ नॉन मुस्लिम्स को वो रिज़र्व कोटा नहीं दिया गया, और जबकि वो भी उसी कैटेगरी में आते थे। फिर हमारा जो टॉपिक है वो बड़ा क्लियर है कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जो है वो अपने राइट्स ज़रूर दे रहा है, लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली उन राइट्स के लिए हम कुछ नहीं कर रहे। अभी सैमुअल साहब यहाँ बता रहे थे कि इतने पैसे मिले और इतने करोड़ों रुपया मिला और हमें फंड्स मिल रहे हैं, लेकिन वो फंड्स हमने क्या करने हैं अगर लोगों के हकूक़ को हम प्रोटेक्ट नहीं कर सकेंगे, अगर स्टेट यहाँ माइनॉरिटी राइट्स का तहफ़्फ़ुज़ नहीं कर सकेगी, तो वी डोंट नीड सच मनी एंड वी डोंट नीड सच प्रॉपर्टीज़ विच कैन नॉट प्रोटेक्ट द पीपल हु आर लिविंग देयर एंड हु आर सर्वाइविंग, दे आर ह्यूमन बींग्स। और हमारे यहाँ पे फोर्स कन्वर्जन का सबसे बड़ा मसला है और जिसमें हिंदूज एंड क्रिश्चियंस आर सफरिंग। और सर, आई वुड लाइक टू टेल यू बिकॉज यू हैव सेड दैट देयर इज अ लेजिस्लेशन, देयर इज नो लेजिस्लेशन on forced conversions. There are almost 4-5 draft bills which were presented or tabled, rather presented in the House, Senate or National Assembly, but they were never being through, और उनके ऊपर जो हमारे मुल्लाइज़म है उसने उन बिल्स को एक्ट बनने नहीं दिया, and those bills were turned down. So we need to understand that forced conversion and forced marriages of minority is the biggest issue so far on which we are reluctant to raise our voices. और इसका नतीजा ये है कि हमारी वो बच्चियाँ जो माइनॉरिटीज़ की हैं, क्रिश्चियन फैमिलीज़ की या हिंदूज़ की, they are being forcibly made Muslims, and when they are being used for their sexual pleasures, they are thrown away out of their houses, और नतीजा ये होता है कि the families don't want to keep them and the state has no rehab centers for those girls, and ultimately they end up into prostitution. So these are the basic issues, these are the ground realities. फिर जब when Pakistan was made, उस वक़्त there were 25% of minorities in Pakistan, including everyone. और अगर अब आप देखें तो there are hardly 4 to 5% minorities who are living in Pakistan. Out of fear, फिर सबसे important बात जो है, Constitution has given them right to worship according to their own religion or religious beliefs. But how many people here are free to profess their religious beliefs? I know that Chief Sahab has very, sir, आपके पास बहुत थोड़ा time है और मुझे इन्होंने बड़ी मुश्किल से कहा कि हम आपके बैठे हुए time देते हैं. But I want you to, sir, आपसे हमें बड़ी उम्मीदें हैं. Although you have very few time and you have been made controversial, but yet we are with you and supremacy of the Constitution, for which is the basic purpose of lawyers. यहाँ पे इदारे जो हैं उनकी शनाख्त जो है वो उन अशखास से नहीं है, Constitution की supremacy से है. So हम समझते हैं कि that you are fighting a war for the supremacy of the Constitution, and we are with you. But I want you to hear this, that at the helm of affairs you are sitting there, and you should implement that judgment of Honorable Tasadduq Jilani Sahab in letter and spirit. और जो आज तक सिर्फ 22% 2014 से आज तक 9-10 सालों में hardly 22% implement हुई है, and state functionaries are bound to implement that judgment. So I would like to thank all of you to hear me, to bear me, and I would also say कि ये बहुत हमें इस खुशफहमी में रहने की ज़रूरत नहीं है और हमें आवाज़ बुलंद करनी चाहिए. इसमें कोई हर्ज नहीं है. आप जितने लोग बैठे हैं यहाँ पे, I know कि different minorities के लोग हैं यहाँ, different religions के लोग हैं. हम we need to understand कि पाकिस्तान जितना हम मुसलमानों का है उतना ही आपका भी है, और इसलिए आपको खौफज़दा होने की ज़रूरत नहीं है अपनी आवाज़ें बुलंद करने के लिए अगर आपके साथ किसी किस्म की कोई नाइंसाफ़ी हो रही है. मैं यहाँ देख रही हूँ हमारे सिख बैठे हुए हैं, तो वो आई नो के पीछे सिख वॉज मर्डर्ड और nobody took any action on that, and we are यानी silent on this कि somebody else was murdered. Shias are being murdered, Christians and Hindus, girls are being forced to convert into Muslims. जी बस मुझे 1 मिनट दे दें आप. So मैं सिर्फ I just want to say कि ये बातें हमें openly कहने की ज़रूरत है. हमें इस बात से डरने की ज़रूरत नहीं है कि अगर हम ये बात करेंगे तो कोई मौलवी आके हमें मार देगा और हमसे right to speak या right to express our views छीन लेगा. मेरा ख्याल है कि आप यहाँ बैठे हैं, and I must say पंजाबी में कि तुसी तगड़े हो, we are with you and we will be with you, and we are with our people, whether they are minorities or not, they are human beings, and we are with every human being. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I request our Honorable Mr. Justice Tasadduq Hussain Jilani, former Chief Justice of Pakistan, for his thoughts.
Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Umar Bandial, Chairman of Minority Rights Forum, Samuel Biara, Bishop John, our distinguished citizen Sayyid Babar Ali, Excellencies, Ambassador from Germany and Argentina, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great honor to be here to receive the award dedicated to Mr. Justice A.R. Cornelius, an illustrious former Chief Justice of this country. While this award is an acknowledgement of the humble contribution made by me for the enforcement of religious freedom and minority rights guaranteed in the Constitution. As I accept the award, I dedicate this to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who in his last sermon to the people of Makkah said, and I quote, "All mankind from Adam and Eve, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, except by good conduct," unquote. I dedicate this award to the founder of this country, Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who in his first speech to the Constituent Assembly said, and I quote, you are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosques or any other place of worship in the state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state," unquote. And lastly, I dedicate this award to the makers of the Constitution of this country, which in its very preamble provides a vision that Pakistan would be a state wherein the principles of democracy, freedom, equality, tolerance, and social justice, as enunciated by Islam, shall be fully observed, wherein legitimate interests of minorities and backward and depressed classes shall be fully protected. Article 20 grants freedom to every citizen to profess his or her religion, and Article 25 guarantees equality before law and protection before law. Honorable Chief Justice, I recall while hearing the case which led to the judgment on minority rights and religious freedom, the court was conscious that religion in public affair has many a times led to societal conflicts. A country where the national literacy rate is 58%, where some are afflicted with religious illiteracy, and where absence of ijtihad leads to a myopic view of religious tenets, it is vulnerable to extremism which generates pressure and an atmosphere of fear. Our judicial system at times is not free from such pressures, which cannot be attributed to politicians. One of the biggest threats to judicial freedom, Honorable Chief Justice, is this religious orthodoxy. In such socio-economic milieu, the courts, and especially the Supreme Court, has an onerous duty to protect the constitutional rights of vulnerable groups, particularly minorities. The courts have to play a more proactive role for the enforcement of human rights, the rule of law, and religious freedom. The court, I must add, should act as a pedagogical institution to educate the people about the Constitution and its seminal values. It was this perception which persuaded me to take the only suo motu nostra I took during my tenure as the Chief Justice of Pakistan of a bomb blast in a church in Peshawar wherein 81 Christians died when they were offering prayers. During the proceeding, I also took notice of a newspaper report that Kalash tribe and Ismailis in Chitral were being coerced to convert to a different sect within Islam or face death. The court was conscious of three things. Number one, that to dislodge misperception of religious rights about our faith and to give a counter and enlightened narrative. Number two, that the court has to dilate on the import of fundamental rights of religious freedom and belief in the Constitution. And number three, the functioning of the state have to be reminded and sensitized about their duties in the enforcement of fundamental rights. In a detailed judgment, I issued 8 directives, which included changing the school curriculum, banning hate speeches, creation of a special police to protect the places of worship of minorities, and establishment of a National Council on Minority Rights. To ensure its implementation, I directed that a 3-member bench of the Supreme Court should be created. It gives me immense pleasure to say that the said bench is still seized of the matter because the implementation of the judgment requires a continuous mandamus. However, the latest reports of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan strikes a discordant note as it has identified specific instances of minorities facing persecution, marginalization, forced conversions, and misuse of blasphemy laws. The inspirational commands embodied in Surah Maida and Surah Baqarah have not been heeded to. Notwithstanding this note from the Human Rights Commission, the judgment has struck a responsive chord and has given a hope to vulnerable groups and minorities in Pakistan to work for the creation of a society where the Constitution and its abiding values reign supreme. As long as this hope and struggle continues, the struggle for democracy shall not fail, because as Learned Hand said, and I quote, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies, no constitution, no law, and no court can save it," unquote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As an educationist, I would like to request Chief Justice that 2% quota for all in colleges and universities is implemented, but in the professional colleges it is yet not been implemented. So kindly have overlooked it. And now I request Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Umar Bandial, to come forward to deliver his speech. With a big round of applause.
बहुत सारे पढ़े हुए हैं Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm a judge. We are here to celebrate one of our former luminaries from the Supreme Court. So I start with a verse of the Holy Quran, which speaks about justice and also talks about judges. This is from Surah Al-Nisa, verse 135. O believers, be upholders of justice and bearers of witness to truth for the sake of Allah, even though it may be either against yourselves or against your parents and kinsmen, or the rich or the poor. For Allah is more concerned with their well-being than you are. Do not then follow your own desires, lest you keep away from justice. And now for us. If you twist or turn away from the truth, know that Allah is well aware of all that you do. Justice Cornelius was an embodiment of justice. It's not been mentioned to you, I'll just share this with you. He stood first in the examinations administered by the Allahabad University for matriculation, for intermediate, and for BSc honors. He was a graduate in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And at a young age of about 23 years, he was selected by the Premier Service of India, the Indian ICS, the Indian Civil Service. The finest men and women were selected there. And thereafter, he went to Selwyn College, Cambridge, where again he excelled. What I'm impressing upon you is that such a brilliant man who was in the civil service, who would have reached the heights of prominence in the policy-making circles, in the administrative circles, within 4 years said no to all that. And in 1930, he joined the judiciary. In the judiciary, at a very young age of, I would say, sometime in his 30s, he was selected, he was elevated to the High Court. I'm sorry, there's so many microphones, I can't even hold this. What do I do? Thank you. Thank you. I'll have to minimize my requirements. So he was elevated to the judiciary at the age of 41 in the High Court, Lahore High Court. Within 7 years, ladies and gentlemen, he distinguished himself and he was elevated to the Federal Court of Pakistan. I have spent a total of 19 years in the judiciary in the High Court and the Supreme Court. Justice Cornelius spent 17 years in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. He was one of the longest serving Chief Justices of Pakistan from 1960 to 1968. And in times that were difficult, because Pakistan was an embryonic state, it was growing, it was trying to grapple with all the difficulties of a young country, and of course there were political issues. In 1955, Justice Cornelius, who was by then in this, it was called the Federal Court. In the following year, when the Constitution came, it became the Supreme Court in 1956. In the Federal Court, he was the lone voice which said that the dissolution of the Assembly, Constituent Assembly, by the Governor General was illegal. That judgment today is hailed as an outstanding rendition of justice, for the reason that the majority decided that the Sindh High Court did not have the jurisdiction to decide the matter. And therefore, there was no judgment of the Sindh High Court which could be assailed. It was an illegal judgment. The majority allowed technicality to avoid the truth. And when truth was avoided, justice was avoided. Today, one man's voice is celebrated in our circles. The rest of the men, although they include many distinguished jurists, the majority are not mentioned at all. This is the course of history, and this is the message to any judge who wants to stay on the right course. The course written for us, dictated to us, directed to us by none less than the Almighty through the Holy Quran. But that was not all about Justice Cornelius. He was a simple man. Today I'm informed that he stayed in one room for 40 years. He lived there simply. He had no assets when he retired, and from his pension he paid the bills of this hotel. It was in this hotel where he lived. And I went and saw that room just now, a short while ago. But another beautiful thing about him. In 1968, he was to retire in May of 1968. But his colleague, Justice S.A. Rahman, who had worked with him for years in the Supreme Court, was to retire before then. So in order that Justice S.A. Rahman may become Chief Justice also, do you know what Justice Cornelius did? 2 months prior to his retirement, he resigned from office. He sacrificed. This was a man who had the capability to give and to share. These are the qualities which I submit respectfully judges must have if they have to do justice. I feel inspired by that gentleman because he wrote brilliant judgments also. I just mentioned you the 1955 judgment in the Tamizuddin case. Then there was this famous Doso case in 1958, which is the one that legitimized martial law for the first time in Pakistan. But an offshoot before the court in that case was whether fundamental rights that had been violated prior to the martial law and the cases were pending in the courts, whether those petitions would abate or continue to be enforced. The general tendency was that everything is closed. The constitution is abrogated and a new legal order has started. But Justice Conyers wouldn't believe that. He said, but this happened before the abrogation took place. These rights for fundamental rights accrued and were claimed before the abrogation took place. So even after the abrogation, those fundamental rights will be enforced. And this is the way the gentleman conducted himself. He did something similar in Abul Ala Maudoudi's case in 1964. Two provinces in the country, at that time East Pakistan and West Pakistan, decided to abolish the Jamaat-e-Islami. It was an executive order, opinion of a government servant or an executive officer, whoever it was, declared that this political party should be abolished. There was one view projected by the government that that the fundamental rights did not protect the party, and that the opinion given was reasonable, it was fair, it could be seen, it could be determined, and therefore no interference should take place. Justice Conyers held that this case does not concern the propriety of the order only. This case concerns the fundamental right of freedom of association. And if the political right to associate has been defeated in this party's case, then that's a breach of the fundamental right. And no executive officer, no government authority can sit in judgment on the fundamental right. It is the court which does that. And the result was they lifted the ban. The Supreme Court was together on that. He was the Chief Justice at the time. They lifted the ban. I could say much more about him, but I want to move ahead. I want to move to the subject which may be of interest to you. And this is the subject of minority rights in Pakistan. Thank you, I'm grateful. Our constitution, as Ms. Sabahat just told us, assures freedom to profess religion, to manage religious institutions, subject to public order and morality. Our constitution in Article 21 safeguards particular religions against taxation for the purposes, it safeguards against taxation for purposes of any particular religion. So for no particular reason can other religions be taxed. Article 22 safeguards educational institutions in respect of religion, etc. No religious instruction or ceremony in educational institution other than one's own religion is to be given to the students. No citizen can be denied admission to educational institutions which receives aid from public revenues on the ground of race, religion, caste, place or birth. Basically, our constitution says everyone is free to profess their religion. All citizens have equal rights. There is no discrimination amongst them. And yet, for years, our minorities have felt discriminated, have felt sidelined, marginalized, It is in these circumstances, in the year 2014, some 9 years ago, the Supreme Court, under the charge of Chief Justice Tasadduq Hussain Jilani, who sits with us right here, took up this challenge and came up with directions to protect the rights of the minorities. There were several directions that were issued. Directions about curriculum, directions to ensure that there is no hate speech on social media against minority religions, directions that a National Council for Minority Rights be established, a task force be established, and a special police force be established to protect religious places of worship. A job quota for minorities at 5% be ensured, and similarly an admission quota in educational institutions be ensured. For many years, these directives were carried out under the charge of Mr. Shuaib Sattal, who sits right here. That was a one-man commission. He worked strenuously, selflessly, and achieved many objectives. I may agree with Sabahat, there's a lot more to be done. But pursuant to that judgment, there was movement and a great deal was done. Today, the minorities see that judgment as an umbrella which protects their rights. Today, the Supreme Court acts as a facilitator vis-à-vis the government authorities who have been cooperative. We must not overlook the fact, ladies and gentlemen, we have been through at least 3 decades of extremism. We have lost 80,000 citizens in this country to extremism. And by the grace of God, the situation is improving, and a lot of the complaints regarding violence which the minorities had, and even Muslims had, because of sectarian rivalries, they have diminished. I think that resilience which the Pakistani nation has shown through these turbulent times is a great credit to the people of Pakistan. And with great respect, also the state of Pakistan. Things are on the mend. A task force which was not in existence has come into being recently on 16th of November 2022 under the chairmanship of the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Religious Affairs and Interfaith Harmony. The members of the task force include almost all important executive functionaries in the country, which means that the issues relating to minorities protection and minorities rights would now be handled by persons who are directly related and who have authority over the persons that will carry out the instructions. I have hope and expectation that this task force will do well. Our association with Mr. Sadal continues because he is a court appointee. The court has a special implementation bench. 9 years have passed, but there is an implementation bench for this judgment. And today I've been mentioned a few issues. I said file an application. You see, courts cannot pass executive orders. We cannot act on verbal statements or complaints. These matters come to us through petitions or applications. Notice is issued to the concerned parties and respondents come forward and an order is passed after hearing the parties. But these are public interest proceedings. There's nothing adversarial about that. And I may assure you, for quite some time I was the chairman of the implementation bench. Now it is headed by someone else. And we always found cooperation from the government of Pakistan, as well as the provincial governments. So, nothing to despair about, be positive, and inshallah, we'll progress further in this direction. You see, the protection of minority rights, the protection of rights of different sects within the fold of Islam, all this has to do with awareness and knowledge. You will be pleased to know that the Islamic faith does not appreciate sectarianism. There are several verses of the Quran that talk about it. And it is said that leave these differences to God. Don't fight amongst yourselves. What you have to do is Amar bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Amar bil Maruf is do good deeds. Nahi anil Munkar is others who do bad deeds, just inform them and tell them, don't do this. You don't have to become violent. You don't have to become aggressive, but you should stop that. You should advise that. In relation to religion, the Surah Baqarah in Ayat 256 says, there is no compulsion about religion. There is no compulsion in faith. This is your own will, your own wish. In Surah Maida, which is number 5, Surah 5, Ayat 32, it is said, whoever kills one person unjustly is as though he has killed all of mankind. And whoever saves one life, it is as though he has saved all mankind. Mankind, whatever the form, whatever the color, whatever the creed, whatever the faith, is indistinguishable. There is no discrimination. That is how the Almighty considers human beings. In Surah Al-An'am 6, Surah 6, 108, the Almighty says, do not denigrate the deities of other faiths, lest in their ignorance, they disrespect Allah. Thus, Allah has made pleasing to every community their deeds. Let them do their deeds, their religious deeds. In Surah Hajj 22, Ayat 40, he says, due to the intervention of Allah to protect the places of worship of other faiths, the people who were confronting and fighting with each other did not destroy those places of worship. God intervened to prevent the destruction of places of worship. This is how important they are. This is how important the right of worship is. And so on. There's more, but I will not spend more time on that. What I would now turn to is the judiciary. Is the institution to which Justice Cornelius belongs or belonged. The heritage that he's left behind, the lessons that we can learn from him. We have a duty, ladies and gentlemen, under the Constitution and pursuant to our oath, to preserve, to protect, and to defend the Constitution. This is our bounden duty. The highest law in the country, and this duty we perform with utmost commitment and sincerity. The force of judgments that we give must be in accordance with the Constitution and the law. And when that is the case, our judgments have a moral authority. Just like the words of the Bible have moral authority, just like the words of the Holy Quran have moral authority. Moral authority comes from something which is good, something which is pure. Our judgments have the force of moral authority when they are given in accordance with the Constitution and the law of Pakistan. When do judgments have moral authority? Ladies and gentlemen, they have moral authority when they are passed on the merits of the case. Otherwise, in Tamizuddin's case, 1955, dissolution of the Constituent Assembly, the majority said Sindh High Court didn't have jurisdiction, so they couldn't go to the merits of the case. Justice Cornelius said no. The Constituent Assembly is an organ higher than the Governor General's wishes and discretion to give assent. It was said that the Sindh High Court doesn't have jurisdiction because the law under which they are doing this did not have the assent of the Governor General. And by doing so, by declaring that that assent was not necessary, the learned single judge, the dissenting judge, Mr. Justice Cornelius, held that the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly was illegal and unconstitutional. That judgment survives today as an example because it was on the merits of the case. Whenever we resort to technicality, our focus is shifted elsewhere. I'm not talking about Pakistan. I'm talking about all over the world. All over the world, one comes up with objections that such and such judgment is weak because it does not deal with the real issue. And when it comes to constitutional enforcement, we must not blink our eyes. If it says 90 days for holding elections, it is our duty to say that. It is not our choice. It is not our choice. It is our duty to say that, instead of finding a reason why we should avoid to say that. This is what has happened. You call it controversy. I'm sorry, I'm not worthy of controversy. I'm a very humble person. You say you support us, please don't say that. I'm just one of the members of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. If you stand up for the Constitution and the law, then you must support the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And not any individual. We have no existence individually. Our existence is as a unit, as a constitutional organ, and that is how we function. But the important thing is that the Supreme Court, when it speaks on merit, its judgment has moral authority. That becomes even more important when those judgments are not appealed or no review is filed. Then that means no one has any objection to the judgment. If a review is filed, then it will be heard, because no judgment is binding unless it becomes final. But if a judgment is not challenged, then it becomes final. So let's see what happens now. Let's see what happens now. And I'm optimistic that the people of Pakistan, the leaders of Pakistan, the institutions of Pakistan are all committed to the Constitution. Do you know that in this context, the leaders of Pakistan, the political leadership of Pakistan agreed to start negotiations, which have not ended yet. This is what we were informed. We have nothing to do with that. But at least they are conscious that they have a duty to comply the Constitution. And we are there to support that effort. Otherwise, our judgment is there. It has a force of its own. It may not be implemented today, but it will last to the test of time and shall be implemented tomorrow. Now, I have not much more to say except to thank our hosts, Mr. Samuel Pyare. Where is he? Mr. Samuel Pyare, the Honorable Bishop, the pastors and the bishops, and I don't remember exactly what your offices are, but it's a matter of privilege to be here. I haven't told you that one of the most respected citizen of Pakistan, for whom thousands of people have love and affection, is sitting here amongst us. He is devoted to education because he feels, and rightly so, that education is the source for progress for the individual and for his community and for society as a whole, because he comes back and shares his education. Who has given away money, time, effort, love, support, everything to students for giving them good education. He is the founder of one of the best institutions, academic institutions in the country, which started as a business school but today offers engineering, law. Tomorrow it will be medicine, I'm sure. I'm not sure if there's a medical school yet or no. Not yet. And I'm talking about Sayyid Babar Ali. Let's give him a... It's delightful to meet wonderful people. As Sayyid Babar Ali had a role in my life also. So thank you, sir. My other great benefactor sits here, Justice Tasadduq Hussain Jilani, totally committed to the law, so gentle and so refined, such a good example of judicial character, conduct, bearing, and delivery. I salute him also, because one of the great advantages in life, or blessings of life, is when you have heroes to look up to. So I am very lucky in that respect. Within my profession, within my vocation of judges and my profession of the law amongst lawyers, I have come across such outstanding people. I cannot stop thanking the Almighty for those associations. This is a memorable occasion for me. Thank you very much, all of you. My best wishes. And the implementation bench is always there. File an application and let's see what happens.